what's at stake here isn't just whether kids learn to read in the purely mechanical sense, whether they develop the skill. It's not just that they can't get information from reading books and reading magazines and school assignments. There's something else going on here, and it's this that's the most significant part of it all.
I can't understand what it's saying.
Children who experience protracted difficulty with the challenge of learning to read blame themselves. They think there's something wrong with them. They feel ashamed of themselves. And children who feel ashamed of themselves, like all human beings, want to avoid the things that cause them to feel ashamed of themselves. So what happens? What happens to the life trajectory of a child when they develop an emotional aversion to the feeling of confusion? When their emotional intelligence wants to leave the scene, wants to escape from confusion because confusion causes them shame. Well, when a child's mind starts to develop avoidance behaviors, avoidance of confusion, then that avoidance of confusion can spill out into the confusion that's involved in learning about other things. And it's this core deep structure of reading's influence, both at the cognitive, linguistic, automatic processing level and at the emotional avoidance level. That is why reading has such a powerful correlation, or reading difficulties have such a powerful correlation with all these social pathologies. The reason that there's a high coincidence between, or correspondence between people that are in prison and low literacy, or juvenile justice, children in the juvenile justice system and low literacy, is not just the absence of the ability to read. It's not just the absence of the mechanism. It's not just the absence of the tool of being able to read. It's what happened to them. It's what happened to their sense of themselves, their confidence in themselves, their trust in their ability to learn. It's what happens when a child develops mind shame. It's what happens when a child develops an automatic unconscious aversion to the feeling of confusion. Because an automatic aversion to the feeling of confusion decapitates learning. It disorders, disentrains, disconnects, disrupts, avoids learning. Given the enormity of what's at stake, we have to proceed from here differently. We have to change the trajectory of the way that our society learns to read. And in order to do that, we need to have a new appreciation for the challenges. And as we go forward in this series, we're going to talk about those, the various dimensions of what's involved in the process of learning to read, the early life learning trajectory of children, right? The kind of early language exposures that they experience, the emotional resilience or self-esteem that allows them to have more frustration tolerance, more attention span to be able to work through the struggles that they encounter, right? How much literacy exposure they've had in the home. What kind of literacy practices did they engage in the preschools they were in? What kind of literacy practices did they engage with friends, right? How much computer time did they have? There's so many variables. There's so many variables involved with this. But at the core of it, it's about the readiness trajectory of children, how ready they are for the challenge of taking off with reading. And then there's the challenge itself. What's involved mentally to take this code and automatize it into this internal language experience? And then what happens to children who aren't ready or who aren't met with sufficiently relevant instruction, who aren't met with instruction that's differentially applied to where they're at developmentally, right? What happens to them is this shame, and how that shame folds back to become the primary obstacle to them learning to read.